Welcome to one of the most unique airline museums in the world, TWA Museum in Kansas City, Missouri. Let's start the tour.
There was a sign that we passed by that says museums this way. Somebody wrote on TripAdvisor that to find this TWA museum is a little tricky, but don't give up. Now I'm after this MD-80, a red TWA MD-80. I really hope we can get a nice picture with it. Oh, there was a museum sign, so I think we're in the right direction. I see the TWA aircraft. It says road closed to through traffic. See, it's saying road closed. Clearly we were going in the wrong direction. That TWA MD-80 that we saw, I actually called the TWA Museum. They said it belongs to somebody else. Right now instruction is to keep following this path. We're going to see a big white building under a bridge, and that's the TWA Museum. And he did say at one point that we are on the other side of the airport. We'll just keep following this road, keep making right until we see a big white building. See, there's a bridge coming. This is what we are passing through. Downtown Airport, Charles B. Wheeler. Oh, there we go. TWA Museum signature. Give everybody perspective. You see where that red TWA MD-80 standing? That's where we were on the other side. And that's what I said on the phone, that we were by the Continental Airlines trijet that's being taken apart. By the way, we just saw a fighter jet take off from this very runway, which I don't think I've ever seen a fighter jet take off this close. Not on video, but it was very impressive to look. Trijet. So right at the entry, and there is the TWA Museum sign over there. Check out 307 Stratoliner. It started as Transcontinental and Western Air, the Kansas airport in 1935, DC-3 circa from 1940. The museum tour is all guided, and it starts with an incredible history led by people who worked for TWA.
Whose parents worked for TWA, so second generation. Like, we met two people who were giving guided tours, and they're second generation employees for TWA, which is amazing. They have so much information, knowledge about the history. First seemed like it's not a huge museum, but there is so much detail, so much memorabilia, so many models, it's pictures, uniforms. You go through it, you go through each one of the details, you can spend hours or a whole day easily.
Well, I'm going to say you can spend a week reading every nick and knack here, because it's put together by the employees. Now, the tour that was given to us by somebody whose father was a flight engineer and actually died in a plane crash in Milan. What we're going to do now is play a number of clips from the tour. If the sound is bad, I apologize, because we are next to a real hangar, and this is not like an official recorded museum video, but you'll give you enough an idea so then you can decide to come here and explore the history of this incredible museum on your own. Even though TWA never had a Concorde, here's a model one.
We were told by the tour guide that TWA did win an auction to purchase the Concordes, but by the time it was time for them to purchase it, they realized that British Airways and Air France were losing a lot of money owning Concorde. So they never actually owned a Concorde plan, but they did win an auction. Now, at the beginning of the tour, we also learned that this museum was awarded
second best aviation museum in the United States. The history, and it's because of the volunteers who are seeing in the back screen. It's because of them. They can talk about each item if in fact some of those items actually belong to the employees or the volunteers working here. Khizer corrected me. Our tour guide's father passed away in a Lockheed Constellation that crashed in Milan. Yeah. And that was, they have a memorial room for all the employees who have passed away in plane crashes And, he has a book in there that talks about his father passing away. So it was quite touching and emotional. Check out this 747 model. It was found in a dumpster. And the people saw a wingtip sticking out of the dumpster. They rescued it, brought it to the museum. Each one of these items and pieces here have a history around. Look at the baggage tags here. All the plane models that TWA had, well, except for the Concorde. And you can check out the dad we were talking about, who passed away a flight engineer who passed away in Milan at the age of 41.
You can also find some of the not so successful marketing campaigns of their time.
It was a beer campaign with a pressurized keg that only produces fuzz at that altitude, and so this experiment did not work by Blue Chip Service. Pam there, who's one of the volunteers, brought a couple of gifts for his Anissa. She said that they're airplane models that you can make when we're in our flight back to New York. We're gonna go through some of the clips around the museum, so hopefully you can hear the sound. Check out this video, come support the TWA Museum, and then go to New York and stay in the TWA hotel to complete your TWA package.
Yes.
This is gonna be a different episode than any of our other episodes. You're gonna hear stories directly from a TWA employee whose father also flew for TWA. Enjoy.
Here's the route that they flew. To Kansas City, to Wichita, and Waynoka, Oklahoma. The Constellation airplane was delivered in 1944. TWA owned and operated over 147 Constellations over the years. Howard Hughes, the owner, and Jack Fry, the president, flew that airplane nonstop from Burbank, California to Washington, D.C. in 1944. And they established a transcontinental speed record. It took them just under 7 hours to fly from Burbank to Washington, and they averaged about 320 miles an hour. After the war was over, he was transferred back to Kansas City as a mechanic, but he had made some friends there who were flight crew members, and they said, you ought to be a flight engineer. So he went to flight engineer school, became a flight engineer on the Boeing 307 Stratoliner, and then later moved to the Constellations. Picture of the first trip to Paris in 1946. Now, it came up to the post-war years, TWA management and Howard went to the government and they said, you only allow Pan American as an international flight carrier. So we'd like to do that too. We'd like to fly to overseas points. And we showed you that we can do that because we flew 10,000 missions for the Air Transport Commander in World War II. So they were granted permission to start carrying passengers overseas, and that was the first flight in 1946, leaving from LaGuardia to go overseas. DC-4s and the DC-3s were going away in the early 50s because they were having struggles on the board with Howard and getting financing to acquire some additional 707s. They fell behind and didn't get delivery of the 707s, but they were able to get 30 Convair 880s, which was a little bit smaller than the 707. It was a 4-engine airplane, but it was the fastest commercial airliner. 707 basically could fly at about Mach 0.82. 1964, they started getting the 727s, the 3-engine jet. 1966, the DC-9s. With the advent of those two airplanes, they were retired to Constellations in 1967. TWA became the first American all-jet carrier. 1970, they started getting 747s, which is a 4-engine wide-body airplane, carried around 400 people. 1972, they got the L-1011. It's a 3-engine wide-body airplane, carried just under 300 people. It was the first airliner that was certified with auto-land capabilities. In 1980, they ordered 3 747 SPs. So a little bit smaller model of 747, but it had bigger engines and had longer range. They thought they were going to get a route to Beijing, China. However, they didn't get the route to Beijing, China, so they wound up selling the airplanes to American Airlines, who did get the route. 1982, they started getting the 767s. It's a twin-engine wide-body airplane, carried around 200 people. It was the first twin-engine jet that was certified to carry passengers overseas. Up to that time, it had to be either a 3 or 4-engine airplane. 1990s, early 90s, They started getting the 757s, which is a twin-engine narrow-bodied airplane. And in the late 90s, they ordered some of the 717s, which were kind of an advanced version of the MD-80s and DC-9s. The guy who donated the chair to the museum was a guy who had been the top lawyer at TWA. And he said Amelia Earhart actually sat in that particular chair.
Oh, wow.
So he
Amelia Earhart.
So he was the top lawyer, so it has to be true. Now, back in the early 70s, TWA had what they called the Award of Excellence, where I was, as an employee, could nominate you, my fellow employee, because you did something really special. You saved the company money, you saved somebody's life, you really helped somebody on a flight, all different kinds of reasons. And people from every organization within the company were nominated. And they would have a big banquet somewhere. It could be London, Chicago, New York, L.A., whatever. And they'd invite the honorees and their families to this banquet, and then you give out awards. The awards might be like this crystal vase here, this crystal decanter, a fancy ashtray thing. This was an award given to one of the pilots. There's another plaque up here. It has the circuit breaker out of the 727. Now, there was an attempted hijacking in 1970, and the pilot was actually shot in the attempted hijacking. He wasn't hurt badly. The bullet went through him. I think it went through his hand and into the circuit breaker. So for his award of excellence, they gave him his circuit breaker back.
Oh, wow.
They left on the hour and the half hour. Our marketing department decided we should have a bigger piece of that market, so we'll leave it a quarter to the hour. This case over here has to do with the ground service, airport service for passengers, early ticket stock. Usually we used to handwrite tickets, and there's the validator stamp there that after you wrote the ticket, you had to validate it. And I used to have my validator, it said Agent 33 on it, but I don't know what I did with it. It's used to train potential ground support people. I think they even did some training for some of the, where the fleet service employees are washing down the wing on the airplane. They got a big long cloth.
Oh my goodness.
It looks like
Oh my goodness.
it might have been some kind of thing, but that's, they run that down the wing to wipe it off.
Oh my
TWA was the first American carrier that purchased an option to buy Concords.
Oh.
And when the time came to exercise that option to complete the purchase, they realized that British Airways and Air France, who were flying them, were losing money on every flight. Congress passed a law that says you can't fly supersonic over land. The British and French governments were subsidizing the airlines and the manufacturer of the Concorde. So if you can't fly supersonic over land,
What's the
we
point?
don't need it. And of course, that was right at the time. It had the big fuel crisis, where fuel prices jumped up a whole bunch during the early 70s. So it did not prove to be a likely airplane for TWA. You can see the upper deck over here. The manager got tired of it because it was starting to fade on the inside, and we didn't have those cups in the interior anymore, and we didn't have a lounge upstairs. We had seats now, so he didn't think it represented TWA very much. So he sent it off to Chicago, and they had it on display at O'Hare Airport for a while. It was all broken up. One of our guys took it home, repaired it, rebuilt it, repainted it. He redid the entire interior, hand painted each of the seats and all that, and he put LED lights in it and everything. So now we have a really nice representation of the L-1011, and this is the galley down here. Where the cabin attendant worked down there to prepare the food, then she put it into a lift and sent it up.
The galley is
upstairs.
down.
Did you do
Oh
that?
my
Yeah, I
God.
worked this one, I worked that one.
Yeah.
Too.
You have worked in the galley down there? Oh,
Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Oh my
She
God.
can probably tell you lots of stories about working on those
Oh, you don't want to
airplanes.
know those stories?
I just flew for 3 years as a flight engineer on the 707, so I don't have a lot of stories. I have a few. And there, over here is a model of the rocket ship that was on display at Disneyland. This is a model of that. And at one time, that rocket ship, the real one, was on top of the TWA office building down at 1735. This whole case here has to do with our in-flight passenger service. TWA always selected top designers of the era to do the various uniforms. He didn't start using hostesses until 1935. Prior to 1935, they had what they called couriers who were served on some flights. And they would serve the customer, a passenger, a cup of coffee. They'd pour coffee out of a thermos. Like that, you know. If the couriers weren't on the flight, then the co-pilot would have to go back and pour coffee out of a thermos and all that for us. But you can imagine wearing a white one all day long. You get to your layover, you have to go to your room and wash your uniform to wear it the next day. So the first post-nurse uniform is depicted here. It's referred to as the pettigirl uniform. There was a famous photographer of that era, 1940-ish, that said he was at the airport and he saw the hostess in her uniform, and he thought, well, she looks really sharp. She had a little hat on, so he had her salute, and he took her picture. And so then he showed the picture to the company. The company liked it, so they started using that picture to recruit young women to be hostesses for TWA. Then the military saw that picture, and I guess nowadays you'd say they photoshopped it, and they used it for recruiting young women for the military during World War II. Hostesses were not allowed to smoke or drink when they were in uniform, okay? But if they wanted to go into the coffee shop and sit down and have a cup of coffee and smoke a cigarette while they were waiting to go get on their flight, they could unbutton that flap and pull it down, and now they're not in uniform anymore.
Oh, that's brilliant. You see that little flap? It says TWA, right? So if they cover that, then it doesn't look like a uniform, then they can smoke and drink or whatever.
Yeah. This is some of the passenger service items back in the 40s and 50s. This is the meal service tray here. Then you move up here. This is our Royal Ambassador First Class service that started, I think it was like 1969. Get up to 1979, 1980. They went to Ralph Lauren, invited a lot of their top business customers to come to the banquet. They were paper, and they tore easily. And the captains that I knew back in that time, they had their own little repair kits that they carried with them. They had Scotch tape. They had these little small staplers. They had safety pins and all that to try and hold them together. They tore some, especially if they got wet. You know, you spilled water on them, then they'd really tear easily. Northrop made about 14 of these for TWA. It was one of the first all-metal airplanes. It was one of the faster airplanes of the era. It was primarily for carrying the mail.
Did any of these survive in existence for now?
There's one left. Smithsonian, was opening up the Air and Space Museum on the Mall in Washington, D.C. And they were opening that up, and they wouldn't have it done in time for the bicentennial in '76. They found two of them that had been TWA airplanes that had been wrecked and stored in a barn. And here's a picture of the wing over here. So they pulled it out of the barn, they brought it down to the overhaul base. TWA mechanics, retirees, the engineers volunteered their free time, and they rebuilt the airplane. Now it hangs in the museum. Now this display here was put together by some of the cabin attendants that during the Vietnam era, like between 1964 and 1975, we flew hundreds of flights to Vietnam, and the really senior cabin attendants bid on those flights because they like to do it, and because they got a lot of time and good pay. But one of the cabin attendants, maybe more than one, took her smock, this is a serving smock I think that they put on, and she collected badges from all the guys that flew with her, and sewed them on her smock. Another one of the cabin attendants had a spare blouse that she had a lot of the soldiers sign. Now this is Jack Fry's desk. We found it in storage. It's sitting in here. The stories of those guys is really something.
Where we ended up.
Yeah.
Now it's going the opposite
Back in the
direction.
old days, on international, they had cabin attendants, a lot of the cabin attendants. TWA never had stewardesses.
Really?
They always had hostesses because they wanted people to be welcoming and to be a hostess in your home, welcoming people in. And at first they wanted them, like I said, they wanted them to be nurses because they wanted people to be more comfortable with being on the airplane, so if they got sick or somebody there that could take care of them and all that.
Right.
The memorial room is dedicated to all the flight crew members who lost their lives in accidents over the years. primarily Flight 800, which crashed in 1996. There was 230 people on board, including 56 employees, because there was an operating crew of 18 on the airplane. There was a whole deadheading crew of 18 on there, and then there was 20 people that were traveling on vacation passes and business passes. So it was a really big blow for the airline as a whole. So.
Paris, flight number.
Jeff
They
did
changed the
Paris.
flight number on that after that.
Did they?
Yeah, I forget what they changed.
I used to
it
fly 800 once in a while when I was an engineer.
Just didn't identify the number to Paris routes anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's a shame. I was on reserve. I was based in Chicago or New York. And I know some of these people.
Yeah.
And the new hires just.
So I did a little research and we came up with a list of all the accidents that involved crew members' deaths. There's a lot of other things, but there was like 29 accidents involving something like 215 crew members over the years. This book here is one that I created before we ever did the room. This is about an accident that occurred in June of 1959. Constellation crashed after takeoff out of Milan, Italy, in a storm. My father was a flight engineer on that flight. And there was 70 people on it. But there was a guy over there in Milan, Italy, or outside of Milan, in this little village, that wrote a book about the accident. There's the book, picture of the book that the guy wrote.
Oh, wow.
It's very much like the pictures you've seen of the big airports everywhere. She got on 10, that Betty Davis, famous actress out there, she was wanting to get up to Minnesota to see her mother, who was very ill. And she kept trying to make arrangements to fly to get up there. She couldn't get decent arrangements. So she called her friend Howard. And she said, "Can you get me up to see my mom?"
Wow. So
they put her in this airplane, and they flew in here to Kansas City, and then they flew up, took her up to Minnesota. Is Ruth Richter Holden. She is the daughter of Paul Richter, one of those guys I mentioned as one of the original founders of TWA. And she was looking to buy an airplane back in about 2005. And as she's going through the paperwork on the airplane, she realizes it's the exact same airplane that TWA had operated for a while, and her father had actually owned for a while.
Oh.
So she bought the airplane, she put it in the TWA paint job of that era, and she would fly it around to air shows. If you want to go inside the airplane, you're welcome to do that.
All right, so we're gonna head in.
Oh, baggage capacity go up.
So cute.
Come on in, sir. Please have a seat.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Sir, please move up. Please have a seat. Welcome to TWA. Please have a seat.
I'm sure you would like the pillows, Bob.
Oh, wow.
Look.
So that's the control.
This?
That's very neat.
We want to be the thing. What? What?
Alia,
We want that.
This is so much fun.
let's see if we get some time to look through the galleries. So far, we have gotten a great tour by somebody who worked at TWA,
Yes.
and our tour buddy or partner is somebody who was a flight attendant
Yeah.
in TWA. So
That is so cool.
we're getting an incredible airline museum experience. We're gonna head out, take some pictures of this plane, and then probably go back into the museum and gift shop. So look at the chairs. Baggage capacity 220 pounds.
This is the same door for a 727. I call it the D.B. Cooper door, if you remember who D.B. Cooper was. D.B. Cooper was a man who hijacked a Northwest Airlines flight back about 1971. He got on the airplane, had his little package sitting on his lap. I took off and he called the cabin attendant over. He says, "I've got a bomb." He says, I want 4 parachutes and $200,000. So they went back and landed, so he could get his 4 parachutes and $200,000. He did let the people get off. Crew kept on there. And then they took off, and he told the captain he was going to want to fly to Mexico. He wanted to head that way. This is up over the northwest country, up Washington, Oregon, up that way. He told me he wanted to keep it under 10,000 feet and keep it low and slow, you know. So he opened this door, they went back there and released the stair door from the back of the airplane, went down the stairway, sat down there, and jumped off. Never to be heard of again.
Wow.
We have a lot of tooling, instruments, shop testing equipment here, RMI indicator out of the Connie, DC-3 compass, 747 autopilot control unit down here. Now, these models are not to scale because they would not have fit in that hangar as it was built. It was built for like DC-3s.
Yeah.
After World War II, TWA did have a couple of B-17s that they used for checking flight equipment, much like they did the Electra. That's interesting. Now these tables, this is typical of what we had in the various classrooms, whether it was for cabin attendants or pilots or mechanics or ticket agents or whatever. This is from 1967, and there is a white dot by each of the cities served by TWA at this point in time. He says, do you have a lot of clean underwear? I said, what do you mean, do I have a lot of clean underwear? Well, we need a flight engineer for a Hong Kong trip.
Wow.
I said, well, heck yes, I'll go to Hong Kong. So we flew out of New York to Madrid. And we laid over in Madrid. And we went from Madrid through Athens into Cairo. We laid over in Cairo. Then we went from Cairo across Saudi Arabia, landed in Bombay.
Wow.
Quick stop there. And on to Bangkok. We laid over in Bangkok for 3 days. On the 4th day, we made a round trip to Hong Kong with a 6-hour layover in Hong Kong. So I got to go up top that mountain there.
Oh.
And then
Victoria's
back to Bangkok, laid over 3 more days, and then went back home. So I was gone 14 days on that trip.
Wow.
My wife wasn't particularly happy. The pictures on the wall over there were of what was the TWA terminal at Kennedy Airport in New York, which once it was closed, it then became, it was acquired by another outfit, and they built a hotel around it.
Yeah.
It's now the TWA Hotel, not original, but it's period.
So that's from Howard Hughes' office.
Yeah. Seats that we have in here are from
Oh, wow.
American/US Air. There's some first class seats and some business class and coach class seats. Okay,
So we are heading out of the museum. I'm gonna keep the camera running so you guys can see some of the founder's office. TWA founder's room is here. Hopefully you saw that. The TWA flight attendant strike down discrimination employment practices. This was pretty fascinating. You're forced to resign at age 32. That rule was eliminated in 1968. This was that room that you guys saw in memory of all the people that have lost their lives working for TWA, especially also that 747 flight. And our tour guide's dad who passed away here June 26, 1959. It's such an incredible aviation historical museum. You're back into the models room. You kind of spend in the tour, you spend about 1 hour or so in here, or maybe 45 minutes, talking through all the history, all the posters here. There's a donation box, make sure you support them. Table, I mean, this is aviation gem in Kansas City, Missouri. And check out, even as you're entering or leaving, there's aviation history all around Look, TWA. Now our tour guide was Don. That was his dad who passed away in the Lockheed. He was fantastic. Like just hearing his stories about the history of TWA. Oh my God, that was an experience. This was not like a typical museum trip. This was an experience.
Hope you guys enjoyed this tour with us, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.
Bye for now.
I'm on the window seat. Welcome to one of the most unique aviation museums in the world, TWA Museum in Kansas City, Missouri.
Let's start the tour.
Can we go to Paris now?
Let's go to Paris, but maybe not in this plane.
And the history.